Before the jury even hears opening statements in Donald Trump's first criminal trial, Trump and his allies are working overtime to sow doubt in the process. Fox host Jesse Watters has already questioned if this jury can be trusted, revealing key information about some jurors in the process. On Thursday, one of the selected jurors asked to be excused after loved ones figured out she had been selected. And of course, Trump continues to attack the judge on social media. Prosecutors say Trump has repeatedly violated his gag order. Judge Merchan has a hearing on that scheduled for Tuesday. Back with us, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal.
Congresswoman, as a member of the judiciary, what is your biggest concern going into this week?
Well, I think my biggest concern is that in some way Donald Trump's allies will try to use this trial to, sow fury across the country. But I will say, Alicia, that hasn't been the case so far. Donald Trump looks weak in this trial. He's sitting in there. He is not used to being disciplined by the judge. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is out on the campaign trail. He's doing events everywhere. And Trump is having to go through this trial with a set of jurors who will be interesting to watch because they are clearly people who, had to go through a rigorous process to stay on that jury panel. But I think that this is a moment where the country can continue to see the ways in which Donald Trump has lied, has done things that nobody would expect of a president. But let's not forget, 91 felony counts for this man, and I think we're all watching, having gone through the impeachment trial in the Judiciary Committee.
So I want to focus on little Jesse Watters because he's being a pathetic little tool right now, as far as I'm concerned. What he's doing by calling out these jurors and opining on how they're going to acquit Donald Trump based on this. So you have, for example, Daily Beast, Watters on jury. He's sowing the doubt, trying to, keep this narrative going. He goes and he's talking about, well, the second juror Watters described as a nurse from the Upper East Side with a master's degree. She's not married, has no kids, and lives with her fiancé who works in finance, Watters said, chuckling for some reason. We don't know. Why would you chuckle at that, right? Well, we do. What does this say about the forces that are trying to further undermine a very important aspect of our judicial process, which is citizens sitting as a jury, dispassionate, observing the facts as they're presented, assessing all of that. Yeah. And then you have someone like Jesse out here forecasting and literally trying to gin up crap about the jurors. Right. There's a reason why the judge has made sure these jurors are not known. Right. And there's a reason why, as we've seen and talked about, certain jurors are like, you know what, I don't even want to be a part of this because I don't want to be threatened. I don't want to have to deal with it. How do we deal with that part of this? I think this is the scariest part, having been a member of Congress who has had to move my house because people came to my house with a gun. Exactly. Right? We watched what happened on January 6th. We watched the former president incite an insurrection. And so I think that this is the thing the country is in the middle of. Those jurors should all have protection immediately. There is no reason why they should not all have immediate protection, because I don't trust the political situation that we're in. And I don't know how we ask the media to be responsible about talking about this, because we have a whole part of the media, not this station, but a whole part of the media that is designed to lift up this kind of violence and intimidation and to undermine the judiciary. I mean, this is really what I was saying to Alicia about my biggest fear about this, is that this turns into another opportunity for the MAGA extremist Republicans to, just continue to generate brutality, violence, nastiness against these jurors who are just doing their civic duty. Doing their civic duty. And by the way, Jesse, you have no idea how this jury is going to rule. So just shut the hell up and let it rest.
Let them have it, Mr. Chairman. It's really insane, though, because Jesse Waters and Donald Trump and others, they know what they are doing. And Sean and I were talking about this the other day, and I'm like, why are people saying that there's no way Donald Trump's going to meet any consequences? And Sean's like, because people are scared.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. People are scared. And these jurors, I mean, the New York Times wrote about it. The jurors are risking their safety and their privacy to sit in judgment of a former commander-in-chief who is now their fellow citizen.
Right.
A heavy responsibility that could unnerve even the most seen-it-all New Yorkers. That is... Take a step back. Like, these people are putting their families' lives on the line. We don't know their names, but Donald, his lawyers do, and I believe that it wouldn't be out of their own possibility that Donald Trump is at least aware of who some of these people are.
No, that's right, and somehow that it finds its way into the public, which would be terrible. And, you know, I go back to the responsibility of Congress here, because had the Senate actually gone through with the impeachment of Donald Trump, we would not be in this situation. And I remember Mitch McConnell giving a speech that sounded like he was going to vote for convicting, but he didn't. And he made a lot of arguments that made no sense about why he couldn't, given what he was laying out, given what had been laid out in the impeachment trial. And it is the thing that worries me, upsets me the most about the situation that we are in, is we have to have accountability work. If we don't have accountability work, if there isn't accountability for what Donald Trump did on many levels on January 6th, you know, in this trial, in every possible way, then that will send a message to Americans about what's okay in this country.
What's
and that
okay,
is
what you can get
deeply
away with.
what you can get away
undermine
with.
the jury system, you know.
What's acceptable.
And what you incite. Because let's be clear, Donald Trump has been using all of these trials trying to incite further violence, further undermining of our democracy. You know, many of the cases against him are serious. Every case against him is serious about what exactly it is that he did as president and what he is continuing to do.
Congresswoman, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.